Baruch Hashem. Okay. Chevre, we're coming towards the end of this mimer. We'll finish in Shem next week before Purim, and then we'll hopefully learn a mimer for Pesach. So when you come to the Seder, you'll have some more things to share with your family and friends and whoever's joining you. And then after Pesach, Bli Neder will start the Kuntus Hachinuch V'Adrocha, the previous Rebbe's treatise on education. That'll be after Pesach, Bli Neder. Okay, so we are on page 207, and we are in middle of the page. The Rebbe here mentioned a very special inyan, a very special idea, and that is that he speaks about something that's, it's hard to face, but we have to face it. And that is, are we really be'emes close to Hashem? So he's talking now about someone who outwardly is close to God. The question is whether deep down he's close to God. He's really close to God. That's the analysis that he's using now. And by the way, it's all meant to explain this idea that we began with on page 206, the beginning of chapter 14, that there's a concept called a Macias, a builtin Macias, non-existence, which the content of which is existence. And to this he's giving us this mashal. I think where he's going, just to put it in perspective, is here you have someone who outwardly is doing everything that's right. He's coming to the minyan, and he's learning his chitas, and he's learning Rambam, and he's giving tzedakah, and he's doing the mitzvahs, and he does achnos archim, right? But nevertheless, when a zulas, a friend, says something to him, or looks at him, and he's impacted, and all of a sudden, he's not committed in the same way because of what someone else says. So what does that show you? That shows you that he, on one hand, he's non-existent. He's bottled to God. He davens, he learns, he does avodas Hashem. But as soon as you touch the right button, as soon as you get deep into himself, and the zulas, the friend, brings out kind of the worst in the person, so he reverts back to his self, which is yet not refined. So that's maybe Shmuel, the connection. He's a built-in Macias. He's not a Macias. But nevertheless, the content of this built-in Macias is Macias. In other words, I am happy to be subdued and nullified, as Shmuel used the word yesterday, to God. But I'm happy about it. That itself is the Macias. That's the yesh, that's the ego, that's the entity. Maybe that's the corollary between the mashal and the nimshal. But talking just about the mashal for another moment, this is a very hard avodah. This is something that Chassidus spends a lot of time on in various different words and ideas throughout the Maimarim. The Alter Rebbe, who in Likutei Torah and Torah speaks so much about Maamar kol almim and Seiv kol almim and Kula kamei kol choshev. Those three terms and ideas you'll find throughout Likutei Torah and Torah. In fact, the Rebbe's brother-in-law, Rabbi Shemayo Gorari, known as the Rashag, the joke in 770 was, he would say a mimer every Shalosh Shudas. Because he had, I think he had he had instructions from the previous Rebbe to do so. Right? So most people were not around. They went home after the Farbrengen, or if it wasn't no Farbrengen, they didn't come back especially to be at his mimer because he wasn't the Rebbe. So
he took the mimer on the shul upstairs.
In the shul upstairs, thank you. That's correct. In the small base medrash.
Yeah.
And to get a minyan to wash, he wanted, that in Lubavitch, we don't wash for Shalosh Shudas. Don't worry, if you do, it's not a sin, okay? But it was a hard thing to get people to wash, but he got his minyan, and he had a few committed people, and they would sing the same songs for 10, 20, 30 years, and he would say a mimer. So the joke was that he repeated the same mimer each week, which he didn't. But he said many mimerim of the Alter Rebbe, and you hear the same words. So to the average listener who didn't know what's going on, he only heard those three words or those three ideas. He said, "Oh, the Rashad repeated the same mimer." So the word got around. He's repeating the same mimer, and of course it was a laugh and a joke, and he wasn't, because I sat just for another moment before we begin. I sat next to him in 1983 or so. This is after he had a stroke in 81 or 82. He got a stroke, and he was a stroke patient. But so he couldn't speak clearly, but he came down to Shabbos morning, and he learned with Reb Shalom Charatonov, Chassidus, they had a chavrusa, and basically they were learning the Rebbe Rashab's Maamars of 1899, Tofresh Nun Tes, which are deep Maamars, and he knew them thoroughly. And in fact, he had Charatonov read it, and he was like listening a lot of the time. He knew him by heart. They say that the previous Rebbe chose him, one of the reasons, as a son-in-law, because he knew 300 Maamars by heart of the Rabbeim at the time when he was a chassan. That's what I heard years ago. I never verified it, but that was the talk in yeshiva, So he knew much more than just Likutei Torah and Maimorim. He was a gorari, the very deep thinkers of Chassidus. So I'm saying this because, when you learn Chassidus and you get into it, then you start confronting issues that are really, the rough edges. You start getting to the rough edges of character and personality. And that's the difference in people. Everyone's good. Kulam ahuvim, kulam berurim, kulam kedoshim. But then there's kulam peischem espiem. Everyone is holy, and everyone is good, and everyone has the best choice. But then there is those that open their mouths. When you open your mouth, there can be ego. That shows that the inside is not yet one, and that's fine. So the Rebbe is looking at this issue here, and here he tackles it with a very interesting observation. What the impact of your friend on you. I mean, usually you don't find that, but that's what he uses here as the example to test whether or not your commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really truthful. So that's what he says. So we're on page 207. Yes.
Maybe the Frierdiker Rebbe here was also hinting, given the circumstances there, about the Russian agents and everything, that the Zulas, maybe is not necessarily the friend, but getting pressure from the government.
Okay, I think not maybe, but that's also included. But Shmuel, we're not living today in Bet Shemesh or in Brooklyn with Russian agents looking at us. So when we learn the mimer, we have to understand that it doesn't mean only Russian KGB agents. But you're right, of course. Historically, it's not even what you're saying is 100% correct. But at the time, that was the situation. But the mimer, is eternal. And so when you learn a mimer today, you have to take it at face value as it applies to you today. Okay. We're on page 297. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 lines from the top. The last word on the line on 207 is Vahasiba. Vahasiba. Vahasiba lezeh hu ha'ilu shaloi. What's the reason this is so? That he kind of is in his own little arrogant world. I believe this is because of his virtue. No, not his ego, not his arrogance. The reason one is, he's making the comparison whether you are emes or you're not emes. So he says when you reach a place of truth, then you're not impacted by the negativity of the zulas, of the other. This is so because initially he was in the category of the other. Him and his friend, him and the other were in one category. Therefore, the other was able to disturb him and confuse him. But when he reached through his own avodah, his own service to Hashem, he reached Moshe, the emes, and the pnimius, and he's occupied just dealing with himself and in the sense of not worrying what the other person will say. He doesn't have a relationship at all with the other. The other has no value in his eyes. Takes for a mashal. Hazulas shel ir acheres edemoval v'loisai. The friend in Bet Shemesh that davens with Yoresh Kodesh, he can make an impact on you. Well, what about the friend from Ichveis Nitivot or Emmanuel that you'd have no idea? And he comes into your shul and he starts giving opinions and he starts telling you what to do, and you're the gabbai. What's your first reaction? Sir, thank you very much. You're a visitor here, my friend. You don't know the ins and outs, so just sit down and daven and behave and be happy that you're here. I mean, even if you don't verbalize it, that's what a normal person would think. That's what he says here. Al derech moshel, just like a zulas, someone else, shel ir acheres, of another city, einam aval v'loisai, would not disturb you because, hey guy, you're not from here. I don't know who you are, so whatever you say is it doesn't go in. It's not that it goes in, and I reject it. It doesn't even go in. So so too, as a kum to some emes, when a person comes to the truth, is a dochyemelt in an ander ort. In Yiddish, he is then in a different place. Art means place. Ander means indifferent. So then he's in a different place. Was jener is him nit bevalvel, and in that place the other person does not disturb him. That's what I told you yesterday. I remember Shmuel, the Rebbe said one Achar Shel Pesach, when it was after, the Rebbe would he would start Fabrengen by the Shkia and go on for 3-4 hours, right? And the Rav Zalman Shimon Dvorkin, as soon as it says Akachavim, he goes out to buy back the chametz from the goy. And the Rebbe spoke a sicha, the second sicha, that you have to be so immersed in learning and davening that you don't even hear the phone ringing. Now, he needed to do what he did, but the Rebbe was bringing out a concept. So the same thing, the Frierdiker Rebbe says here, when you're in your avoid of emes, you're in a different place, and in that place, no one can disturb you. They're not there. They can only disturb you if So in other words, people say, this nudge comes into shul and he makes me crazy, and then there's arguments back and forth. That's because you allowed yourself to go into his space. But if you were to be in your space, then you would not be mevulvul from that. That's the truth. That's what he says here. And he says, when the other sees that you're elsewhere, guess what? He is nullified. He realizes, wait a minute. I'm dealing with someone of a different quality here. And there's true bittul. Now, of course, we have in the Maamar of Amalek that was Amalek's, one of his features is that although Amalek recognized the greatness of Hashem vis-a-vis the miracles for the Jewish people, right, for the Yidden, he had the chutzpah. So chutzpah doesn't take that into account. But we're not talking here about chutzpah. We're talking about an average person who's not acting chutzpahdik. when he feels that this is someone who's in a different plane, he's humbled. He's nisbatel. That's what he says. Ukemimer, as the saying goes, fara emes verliert men sich. Beautiful saying in Yiddish. For emes, when one confronts truth, verliert men sich, we lose ourselves. So he brings now this mashal back to the moral in this mimer, which is talking about the infinite light of God. It's totally separate and removed from the created worlds. Ein Sof is God in a form that's beyond creation. So the worlds and creatures have no value, are not tofes mokim, have no place at all in comparison to the infinite energy of Hashem. And all the worlds and all creations, ki'ilu, as though eino mamish are nothing. I mean, the fact is, we're learning at a table or a chair. There's something. Ki'ilu. It says ki'ilu, as though. V'zeu Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Hisbonim is the Hashem Echad. When you reflect on Hashem Echad, Yochal Liga Iyos Basoda Gemura. You can come to this feeling in a comprehensible way. In other words, what the Rebbe is saying here, it's like the summary of what he said earlier. For this, you don't need emunah. This is hasoga. If you reflect well enough and on the right content, it'll be crystal clear to you, like you see something and like you relate to it, that Hashem Echad. Kitzer. Yevaya b'tivi b'nei Adam, we explain, regarding human condition, human nature, ha'ayavim muskarvel b'nei Torah, those that get close to Torah, aval misbayishim masviva shalehem, but they are embarrassed by their environment. So therefore, they do things for their environment, and that includes sometimes for the wives and sometimes for the husbands, and we'll leave it at that. There are those that serve Hashem who are impacted, allow themselves to be impacted by the other, which disturbs them. But at the time when it's called an auspicious time, when you're having a heart-to-heart conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, or a Stam Shabbos, after a Kiddush with a little L'chaim, and it's one-on-one, or people in an intimate group, and it's between the 4 or 5 eyes. Oz ein hazulas mevalvel. Then the other cannot disturb. Because you are a very supernal, spiritual place. And over there, the opposition of the other has no place. It's not like there is an opinion and I have to reject the opinion. It doesn't exist. In this area, in this arena, it doesn't exist. But you have to create that arena. You have to be in that arena. And he says, and the Rebbe says, this explains what we spoke about earlier, how insignificant the world is in comparison to the infinite God. Just as the Zulas has no place in the domain of truth, so too the worlds and all of creation are so insignificant and worthless in comparison to the Ein Sof. Yes, Moshe.
Rabbi Dalton, can you remind me, what is the word heder? A-I-N Daled Reish. What does that mean?
Heder literally means lacking, missing. But in the context, in Chassidus, heder tfisas mokem means the insignificance. The insignificance. Yes, Jonathan.
What you're saying of me is very, very negative, because when I come to shul, when I used to go to shul before COVID, and before I used to do my business and daven and learn, and then nobody would disturb me. All of a sudden, when I started davening, then people started talking, and I used to get upset when people would talk, because it's not kedai to talk during davening. So I do admit that when I was in the beginning, when I was doing my meditation, nothing affected me. But when I started davening and I started being involved with davening, then the people started to disturb me, and I had to tell them to be quiet.
And the Alter Rebbe Yonason already mentions that in Igeres HaKodesh, when a person gets up to daven and he has the someone come and disturb him. He speaks about it there. And what does he say? He brings. Yeah, what?
Yeah, he says that you should daven more.
And totally ignore the don't get into a discussion, an argument, and because right there. And I'm telling you that this is not what he said earlier. And what you're talking about, Yonason, is true. Meaning to say, it's very workable if you put yourself in a plateau and in a space in a different space. You'll see that people won't disturb you. I'll give you just a silly example. In shul, I just came from shul, right? There's Nebuch, not a teenager or a young adult. Nebuch, I heard he was a yeshiva bacher, and he got into drugs. And he doesn't have where to sleep. So he sleeps in shul, and it's a terrible situation. And when he's drugged up, he doesn't know he can hit someone. It's anyway. So I took the position that I try to avoid him, and I answer his question. He asks for tzedakah. And the minimal contact I have with him, the healthier it is. And I see that when other people, like, they'll say something, they'll make a face or this or that, so he starts fighting with them. As soon as you enter into a, match, you've lost. But when you're higher, when you're in a different place, most times it's like they'll ask and for this for that, and you give them a one word answer, and you face the wall, and you're under your talus, and you do what you have to. They don't bother you. You know what I'm saying? So it's and they'll go elsewhere, Yeah, Yonason, if you're disturbed by noise that's coming from the back of the shul, that's a no-win situation. Then you need to find a shul where there's no noise at all. And you have some shuls like that. Baruch Hashem, our base Menachem here, I mean, if you came in, you wouldn't, it's quiet. The entire davening. There's no, and the Gaba, he just stands in his place. And, sometimes some guys are talking a little bit, quietly, and he just makes shh. He just makes a slight shh, this or that, and with a smile, and we respect it, because that's the right thing to do. So we know that we are wrong, and he's right, and it's flowing, and it's years like this. So it's when you create a certain environment, and that's what the Rebbe is talking about here. So this is not just more words and that we're talking to waste time. This is very important. When you create an environment, people respect you. But you have to create the right environment. Okay? If you don't create the right environment, then people are going to, ridicule you and play with you and criticize you, and it's a big balagan. And I'm sure this is very important for a guy like Moshe. Moshe is a Gaba in shul. It takes all kinds of characters, all kinds of situations. I remember when I was in Bet Shemesh with Shmuel, and some fellow, I hope he's well, he was so upset that Shmuel and I were spitting a drop at Lehevel Larik by Aleinu. You remember Shmuel? I don't even remember his name. I don't remember his name, but You know, and I was standing behind Shmuel, and he had actually attacked Shmuel, and I was saying to myself, what do you want? What do you want from this man? He's davening, he's doing his thing, he's not bothering anyone, you know. But he became like cuckoo. This is before COVID. You know what I'm saying? What, Shmuel? What?
He was disturbing other people to see that. So he made a suggestion. He said, take a tissue, a cloth or something, spit it in the cloth, which is what I started doing.
Yeah, fine. But what I'm saying is the way, that's right, that's my point. The way you reacted silenced him. I saw that too. He had no one to fight with. Imagine you would have said, who are you to tell me? This is my minute. Well, what do you want? The rabbi in the shul doesn't criticize me for, and again, like you could barely see what Shmuel was, you couldn't even see it. It was like so, but he was sitting next to him, so and it seems to me he was from Brooklyn. He lived in Brooklyn for years, so he had an axe to grind. That he had his issues, whatever the case. But because you put yourself in a different space, he was silenced, and I don't think I saw him many other times. He did the same thing, and life went on. So I think, Yonason, when you get back to shul, when the shul's open, find yourself a spot, you have a talis, and just daven, and if you need to, put earplugs into your ears, or cotton. I'm not joking, I don't know, but, I'm serious. If noise disturbs you, and I can understand, then do that, but
I wear hearing aids, so I can't turn them off during my shopping.
Oh.
But I can take them out.
Okay, listen, whatever works for you. I'm just saying that be in a different space of Kedusha and Tara, and Hashem will make it easier for you,
Amen.
Okay, let's continue. Page top of... What? Yes, Moshe. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I want to answer your question as I'm listening to speaking in the last couple minutes. I'm thinking about how the idea that seems to be coming up here is the idea that this is about a person really, really focusing, about a person being able to. We talk about like a person being in bringing himself to a particular space.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, would you say that? Would you characterize that what we're speaking about, that the mimer is highlighting the element of a person really, really being able to focus, to bring himself to another level, because he is being able to concentrate and be disciplined, focus and disciplined. Is that? Would you like those words? Would you associate those words?
Yeah. Yes, I would. Absolutely, the focus and concentration in a disciplinary way, where you're in your own space of goodness, kindness, holiness, and at that time, if you stay that way all day and you don't help your wife at home and you don't help the people around you, that's not the kavanah. But when there is a time when you're in shul and when you're learning and davening, that's the time that's been allotted to for yourself and to become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's, you're right. It's not an easy. That's why it's avodah. It takes that avodah. The Rebbe says, what should you do on a birthday? This is not yon yon. He says it's a day of his boidedus, a time for isolation. Our Lubavitcher Rebbe, who spoke so much about outreach and did so much for outreach with everything else, says that on a birthday it's a time for one to take time for themselves, and that's what he says. It's written. So how do you reconcile the two? The answer is there is once a year. It's the day when you make a reckoning of your own life, what you did in the past and what you want to do in the future. And that requires focus and concentration and quiet. It's not the time for birthday parties. And I'm not saying, the Rebbe spoke about making mesibas. That's another time on your birthday. But if one were to just party all day and not do the hayra of the instruction of the Hayom Yom Yud Nissen, whatever, he's not following that instruction, and it's very, very clear. And mind you, we don't see that in the previous 6 Rabbeim. The Frierdiker Rebbe never said to do that. It's very interesting because the Hayom Yom is mainly instructions from letters and sichas of the previous Rebbe. So I just thought of this. I don't know, Shmuel, do you know if that Hayom Yom Yud Aleph Nissen has a source from earlier? Don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. In fact, I'm going to ask a few of my friends who know the Hayom Yom well about that. I think it's the Rebbe's own chiddush, which is very unique, because he didn't put in a lot of his own chidushim in the Hayom Yom. And I think this is one. And so it's very, very appropriate based on what we're learning now and based on what you asked, Shmuel, about the Moshe, that there's a time for focus and concentration. And the same is true the Cheshbon HaNefesh Thursday night before Shabbos or before Rosh Chodesh. You know, there are times, and this creates a respect, but it's avodah, it's focus and concentration. Some will argue, it's the nature of people. It's the nature. What we're learning in the mimer is that even if it's the nature, whether one person is, all out there and, funny and all over and talking, and then some person's quiet and reserved. It's true. We all have different natures. But here what we're learning is that even if your nature is, you need to understand that if you want to come to a place of dveikus, of connection, of Ein Sof, it requires this, requires this avodah. Now, you get the argument from some will say, you want to get to this place, go put film on with someone on the street. Go find a yid who needs to hear the shofar or needs some tzedakah. And again, usually you'll see that those people saying that are people that are out there. They're not the type that are more reserved and more quiet. They're people that by nature, they can't sit still. And they have to always be active. And they have ADD or ADHD. Like I told you, someone who raises here several $1 million a year to give chassan and kala, right? She's become an icon in Lubavitch to help in chassan and kalas. Mamish, and with the expenses of weddings. And she is an ADHD girl. She couldn't sit, she couldn't sit still. She turned her energy into kedusha. Gewaldig. It's gewaldig. It's beautiful. And I think we have to also look at this with children and grandchildren. Not everyone's cut out to sit in yeshiva. Not everyone's cut out, So I told you that whether the Rebbe's genius in making the Mivtzoyim outreach saved so many guys that all of you know that are on shlichus. I know them from the inside, and I could tell you, not many were shaykh to learn 8 hours Gemara. So what do? They pack packages for Purim. In Morristown, we spent hours packing packages, thousands of packages, and then we got into the cars, and we gave them out of nursing homes, we gave them out of hospitals, we gave them out at the malls. You know how many guys are shluchim and were saved because of this? Yonason knows. He was in yeshiva with us. You know what I'm saying? So the Rebbe understood that this avodah that we're speaking about in the mimer here is something that is not easy, and it's not for and people are just not going to do it. So how do you get them involved? Through the mivtzoyim, through outreach. You have a talent. And this is what you're seeing today. This is in 1970s and 70s. Now today, 40, 50 years later, all these organizations that Chabad has, JLI, Friendship Circle, JNet, and the list goes on. You know who basically runs all these programs? Bacharim and girls. Mainly, not mad. And then they get married and some of them get hired as a job. In my time, most Bacharim were into learning or not learning, but that's it. And then slowly there's the Mivtzoyim periods of Pesach, Purim, Hanukkah, and stuff like that. But there's been a change. There's been a real change, and whether it's good or bad, I don't know, and it's not my place to.
But Rabbi Dolphin, I feel you were about to say that the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying. I feel you were about to say that the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying that this is not for everybody. What we're learning. I could be wrong.
No, I was not going to say that. No, not at all. A mimer chassidus is for everybody. What I'm saying, and what I meant to say is that bepoel in actuality, man on the street, it's not everyone does this, and not everyone is into it. Can do it. So you got to find second best. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But of course when you learn them afterwards, 2 minutes. When you learn a mimer, it's for everybody. But I was just being I was being realistic with a situation that we deal with, and that's why I told you that most of these organizations and most of the great accomplishments that we have today is from singles who are not learning, and they're basically doing the Rebbe's projects and bringing hashem through the internet. I mean, all these Zooms and Farbrengens, you know what I'm saying? It's, okay, Chevra, we spoke a lot today. It's avodas Hashem, so shtickle Farbrengen. But Sunday, mit Hashem, we'll learn more the mimer and we'll continue. Meanwhile, have a great Shabbos Zocher. And I want to conclude with one story. Reb Zalman Zezmer was a big chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he was in shul, and I forget another chassid, Rabbi Yom Kletzker, or another chassid, I forget who it was, who saw him listening to Parshas Zocher, this Shabbos Zocher, and he saw in his eyes a hatred to amalek. And he said to him, where did you learn how to obliterate amalek in such a way? So he said to him, from my Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. I learned his chassidus, and I understood, and I felt what God is and what God doesn't like. And that gave me the feeling of eliminating amalek. So Hashem should help that we should eliminate amalek, which is doubts, apathy, laziness, and all of those traits which are out there. Hashem should help. Zocher es asher osel lecha amalek baderech v'teitzchim Mitzrayim. We should have the geula shleima b'korev mamish with simcha and good health. Amen. The amen. Have a great Shabbos.
Amen. Rabbi Dalton.
Yes.
Rabbi Dalton.
Yes.
6 lines up from the next to the last paragraph in the middle, the same line as kum tzutzunemes. What's the word yemult? I didn't get the types of yemult.
Yemult means dam. 6 lines from where?
What?
Yemult means then. Then.
Then?
Yeah, but where is it?
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's 6 lines.
Oh, I got it.
In the middle.
Oh, is it right? I got it. Is er doch yemult? He is then in a under earth in a different place. Was jener is him.
The only word I didn't recognize was yemult.
Okay.
Is not terrible and not good.
Anyway, you got it. Sei gesund, Davi. Good to speak with you and hear you and see you. Amen. Shabbos Zocher, Mashiach now.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Take care.